Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Postnatal Minds, the podcast. Today, I am joined by Vicki, who will shortly introduce herself and tell you all about the amazing things she does. I hope that you managed to listen to the previous episodes. I've kind of been off the radar for a while because Arlo has been poorly, but we are finally back on track. And today's podcast episode is going to be all about Vicki's line of work around yoga and hypnobirthing and everything to do with that. So, Vicky, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I've got big boots to fill because I loved the last episode. I literally cried and laughed, and then I couldn't wait for the next one. So you have to listen to those as well. So I'm Vicky. I have been teaching hypnobirthing for the last 5 years, and then now I've just finished my pre and postnatal yoga training. So I was sure I'm hypnobirthing, and I've just had a bit of a rebrand to Vicki Thorpe Hypnobirthing and Yoga, which seems a bit scary, but it's exciting.
Yeah, you're so good on your social media. Like all your stuff is so professional. That's one thing that I remember thinking when I first followed you. Like, wow, this girl must have used to work in marketing or something.
I think I just it's my creative outlet. You know, people used to say that, and I say I'm not creative at all. And then I think you find something when you get older that's your. I just quite like doing a little post or a little rambling. I feel like someone might
Yeah,
listen.
yeah. Do you find that, because I've definitely, since I made the transition from like clinical work into self-employed work, I've really had to find that balance though with time on my phone and that side of things for the business and also like being present. So I'm trying to get better at like drafting stuff, and because you could spend all day on your phone if you wanted to, really, couldn't you, getting that creative stuff done. But yeah, how do you kind of boundary that with everything?
Yeah, it's I'm finding more of a balance now. So I haven't ever had specific childcare to work on the hypnobirthing. So I teach in the evenings, and I have always kind of done my bits in nap times, my middle son Harry's nap times and now Millie's nap times. And I teach 2 days a week in a primary school, Monday, Tuesday. So
Oh wow, do you?
yeah, it's just the juggle. Yeah.
Well, you must be a serious multitasker because, I mean, even just doing one of those things alone is like, and having the childcare, like Wonder Woman.
I've really let go of being a perfectionist. So, it's a terrible motto, I'm sure, but I just think like done is enough sometimes. And especially in teaching, because it's a career that you can always have something else you can laminate and you can always do something else.
Mm.
That sometimes, I'm like, yeah, done is enough. So I've done a post, that's enough. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like the more relatable you are as a brand and a mum and a business, like there's less pressure, I feel like nowadays in business to like hide things or like pretend you're in like a really like posh office because people actually, more and more people are doing things from home and getting ideas and just rolling with it. And I think it just makes you more relatable, doesn't it? Like by not putting that pressure on yourself to be a perfectionist.
Yeah, I think like showing the kids and stuff. There was so many people because I posted a lot on the lead up to Millie's birth, and there were so many people that were like, "Any, have you had it yet? Have you had it yet?" And it's like just really kind people that I've never actually met in real life, but who followed that story. So I think then people connect with you, don't they?
100%. Yeah, I felt that recently actually when Arlo was in hospital, and it was like a warm blanket of a chair. It was so
Mm.
nice. But also just knowing that you've like maybe helped one person who might be feeling the same way. Just like motherhood can be such an isolating thing. So like if you make one person feel like, oh, it's not just me, then job done, isn't it? But anyway, let's go back to kind of why does Vicky Thorpe brand, the whole concept of hypnobirthing and yoga exist?
Well, so we did hypnobirthing. We lived in Brighton when I was pregnant with my first. I feel like I was quite young, naive a little bit. I was 26 when he was born. And I just wanted to make it a little bit better. I was really frightened of giving birth. I really just had the view that it's horrific for everybody, and that kind of view that you
Yeah.
leave your dignity at the door and you have no control. And that lack of control for me I was like, I need to do something. Like I'm just freaking out the whole time thinking about birth. So we went to this hypnobirthing course, and it was in Stamner Park, and it was just beautiful. And we did a lot of work to get the hypnobirthing, understand it. And then my husband was just hooked on like the science and the stats. And I think he thought it was going to be a bit hippie and woo. There's anything wrong with that, but it's not my style.
Yeah, do you know, it's so funny you say that, Vicky, because we had exactly the same experience. Lloyd was a bit like, oh God, because it was online, our one, with Albert, because it was lockdown. And like, for me, like, knowledge is power, isn't it? Like a lot of people go into birth just not knowing anything. It's like, you've probably heard this phrase before, but I always remember someone saying, you wouldn't go into an exam without revising. Like just understanding the process and learning is empowering. You're probably getting there.
Yeah. And so then I was like, totally hooked on it. And then Charlie was born in Brighton Hospital. So he's 8 now. And it was one of those things that he was born and everyone went, how was she hypnobirthing? That kind of, still no one was convinced. I don't know if it's, sometimes I feel a bit like people not want you to fail, but there was a lot of like, I don't know, but I mean, it was a lack of understanding and education, isn't it? And people don't know what it is.
I remember people being like, they'll see, like, when it comes to it, they'll be the one grieving for the epidural. I mean, I didn't actually get any of it in the end because I was having an elective C-section, but I wanted the home birth with the hypnobirthing, and actually the hypnobirthing breathing really helped me. But yeah, there is definitely that cultural thing still, isn't there, of like, oh, hippy dippy hypnobirthing. It's getting better though.
But I love your story because I think that is actually, I think you smashed it at hypnobirthing. I would say that is like an amazing positive birth story. So was it you were 42 weeks and then chose to have?
Yeah, I was 42 plus 2, which was like, if like having learned what I'd learned, if I mentally could have gone on longer, I would have, but that was like my limit, and I was like, okay, I'm not actually comfortable waiting any longer. So I mean, you know what it's like in those last, it's so challenging, isn't it, in those last few days, and she was really low, and it was locked down. I was so bored out my head, and I just like the risks were starting to trickle in for me, because obviously there is a tiny bit of risk, even though they like to really overemphasize, don't they? But I just did not want to be induced. I was like, I know I'm going to end up with an emergency C-section, and I'd actually probably like a slight control freak in me, but I had to do a real pros and cons list and made a really informative decision. And that was my decision. Like a lot of people would still have gone for induction, and it was tempting because I really wanted a natural birth. But we had the most beautiful C-section looking over the sea. It was calm. I know after all of that time we were going in tomorrow. And I was hopeful like that night that contractions would start. But I mean, there was that girl. I think I'd have literally been like 43, 44 weeks. Like there were no signs. I was fully, I was fully closed, like nothing. But yeah, both of my journey was the C-sections, and the recovery was hard and is hard. It was, yeah, I was very nervous before my first C-section. But I fell asleep in waiting to go in to have my C-section. I fell asleep with my hypnobirthing. What's the is it Your Birth, Your Baby? I want to say Holly. Is it Holly?
Oh yeah, Holly de Cruz.
Yeah, Holly de Cruz. I listened to her audio tape all the time. Lloyd was like, "Oh my God," because I was in the bath. I was just in bed. I fell asleep. They had to wake me up to say, "You're going in now."
That's hypnobirthing. Don't ever say you didn't do it. That's like, to me, I think that it's more that kind of home birth, water birth that we kind of, I don't know, pedestal a little bit. I think it's about how you feel, and that's, it's that whole thing of that choice of something that's done to us versus something we choose. And I know that something done to me without it being my choice would have dramatically impacted my mental health postnatally. Because that element of control, I can't, I'm a control freak. I'm a primary teacher. That's part of the job, I think, is to have that kind of,
Yeah. And you still hear it now as well. Like, the amount of educating that I did for people that had become pregnant on like, you still hear like, I've got to go in for, and I've got to be induced, I've got to have a C-section, or like sweeps, like people not knowing that sweeps are an option, or like,
Yeah.
and like even C-sections are an option. Like I did my research and I absolutely knew I could say I want to have a C-section, and that I had a right to have one, because obviously it's costly, and there are factors, but like no one, people think that you don't, the no choice thing blows my mind, because the amount of conversations I've had with people, and I've been like, you can do this, or why have you not thought about this? And it's because within the culture of the NHS, God love it, options aren't laid out to you like that. It's like, this is what will need to happen. You will need to come in at 40 weeks, because you'll be over by then, or your term by
Yeah.
then. And yeah, I used to always think about in France, you're not fully booked till 41 weeks. That was like the way I got to 41 weeks. And then beyond that was
Yeah.
like, right, okay. I remember knowing I was going to go in to then be 41 weeks. They were starting to get a bit like, the doctors coming in and being like, right, going to get you in for an induction. Yeah. And I was like, no. And I was like, I've done my research. I had to go in being like, I've done my research. I'm a nurse. And I've looked at the nice guidelines, and I've weighed it all up, and they just knew that they couldn't work that narrative with me, but it's still so present that, yeah, induction. And how many women are probably going to watch this podcast or not, that didn't really realize that a planned C-section was an option, or weren't educated around that, and are forced to have an induction that leads to tears, forceps, emergency C-sections, episiotomies. It's so common. It blows my mind.
Yeah. Literally, if you have an induction of labour, you're twice as likely to need a C-section. And then I just feel so sad, because people go through maybe a really long thing, and it's not, women don't fail. It's the inductions often fail and systems fail, but the women are not failing. I think going into motherhood is the hardest thing for some people, and so going into it doubting yourself and not being confident in your choices and not understanding why things have happened, that's my kind of driver. Because I know looking back, but I had really severe postnatal anxiety after Charlie was born, and I think I couldn't have coped with a bad experience on top of that. I could not. I just think that I would have been in a whole other headspace, having to process. It was a fine birth experience. It was fine. I wasn't like skipping out there. I didn't love it, but it was positive. And so then that drove me to, after Harry was born, train, and then I did that. But actually, the training wasn't with the view essentially to setting up the business. I did the training when Harry was about 3 or 4 months old, because I knew that I didn't want to have that anxiety that I'd had the first time, and I needed something for my brain.
Right.
So,
okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So it was my strategy. It wasn't actually that I was going, do you know what? It was more like, I want to tell everyone about this, and also I need my brain to tick over. Like we were saying at the beginning, I think I'm just like a busy, the posting on Instagram, it just does something for my brain, and I'm like, I tick that, done something, So I think that's what I was doing, and I was doing night feeds and doing hypnobirthing posts to just share of do you know what? It doesn't have to be horrific. And it was for that. And then it kind of organically came that I did a few one-to-ones, and then set up some groups, and then it took off a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's always seems to happen, that you start something. It's really interesting what you said actually as well about, doing something for yourself. And then, I read this book before starting Postnatal Minds, and it was saying loads of women float around and they've got these ideas in their heads. 90% of the time they don't put them to fruition. And actually, I think there'll be more and more women out there like you, and men, who do something because it feels good, and then it just blossoms into something else that helps others as well. I think that's really common, and I think it sounds like you've really adapted from your experience, which totally makes sense as well. So how old are your children? And both of your births were were good and positive?
So Charlie, my eldest, is 8, and he was born in Brighton Hospital. Yeah, I mean, I arrived at the hospital 7 centimetres dilated, so I'd been in a great place at home. And I did have like big wobbles. I had transition, and the hypnobirthing course that we'd done hadn't really covered that I might freak out a little bit just before baby arrives. And so I found that terrifying really for a few minutes. And I wanted to go home, and I decided I didn't want a baby anymore. Thank you very much. All those classic transition stories that you hear with me. And then he was born. So I got out of the birth pool, and then he was born. And it wasn't until I then looked back and learnt some more science. And before Harry was born, I learnt loads about that transition. And so that I knew that if that happened, actually my husband was there and came straight over and was like, it's transition, we're 10 minutes off meeting our baby. And how that fear changed on its head just by the knowledge of what was happening. So what was the worst moment of my first birth was then the best moment of my second birth. Yeah, so I've got Charlie's 8, Harry's 5, and then Millie's 2. Harry was born at home, and he was really slightly early. We actually got married after Harry was born, and we went to see our wedding venue, which if anyone needs a boost of oxytocin, wedding songs and wedding venues, I just went straight into labour in the middle of the town hall. I was like, yeah, this is good to go.
And what point were you at? Like, how many weeks were you?
I think Harry was about a week early, which I don't like to tell people too much that because it's statistically not going to happen. And there's no kind of correlation because then Millie was 10 days late. And so psychologically, I had 2-week early babies, and I thought, oh, the baby, she'll be here any minute. And those 3 weeks of waiting were the toughest 3 weeks of thinking, hang on a minute, where is she? And you know it, went even longer, but it's a lot.
I remember being in lockdown as well, so there was sweet FA I could do to distract myself. I remember going to a garden centre with my mum, like, because garden centres were open weirdly. Do you remember? I don't even know why. I was strolling around being like, I'm so miserable, and like felt like I joined this like 10-month mummers group on Facebook, which was amazing. It's full of like people like hold on girls, 43+1, she's here. And I was like trying to tune in, using all of my energy to be like, right, I can do this each day, and then like there was just no, and it's the most vulnerable, awful way. You're not sleeping, are you, by that point, because you just need a wee every second of the night. And like all the messages, is she here yet? Is he here yet? Yeah, that was one bit of learning actually, because I just didn't tell anyone. Like I told the due month for Arlo, and then when we got his diagnosis and everything, I didn't tell anyone about the C-section date, like not my friends, anything. Just my family, not even my aunties, or just literally our parents and siblings. And then it was in our control to say he's here. And it was just, because we just didn't want any of those messages and everything else. Also, those messages are just so annoying at that time, aren't they?
Yeah, I was still doing the school run, and I just remember people were so kind, and it's because they really cared. But they were, still here. I don't think we'll see you tomorrow. And I was like, please don't talk to me.
I know. So you can't explain it until you're in it, can you? It's so hard.
No, I always say to everyone, plan something nice for 41 weeks. You know, statistically, my first babies arrive around 41 weeks. And so plan like a date and, plan something that you're looking forward to. And then if you don't get to that date, it's a bonus because you've got your baby. And if you do, you've got, a nice dinner or cinema or something that you love.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, actually. I just couldn't do that because everything was shut.
Yeah.
And lockdown, it was like another seafront walk. I was like, it's those walks.
I can't.
And then you hear stories of people like they arrived on due date, and you're like the lucky people that the day that they're due, the babies come, which never happens. But you seem to hear those stories when you're in that situation.
Yeah, it's like 4% of babies will come on the due date. And we also, it drives me mad that we blame the babies about that. We don't blame the person calculating the due dates. If we calculated a due date correctly, 50% would come before and 50% would come after. But we don't. We have 11% come before and then like 85% come afterwards.
Is it really
So
only
you're thinking,
11% before? That is
yeah,
such a small amount.
15% on or before.
Wow. Wow, that's mind blowing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's just,
Amazing.
like it starts you off, the like language of it. If someone's late, you think something's wrong, or you feel worried, you feel anxious. And I think then those things feed into each other, because if you're feeling worried and anxious, you're not then producing the oxytocin. And it just, yeah, it just breaks my heart, really, that kind of pressure that we put on ourselves. It's
Yeah.
just, we just start, even, from the first day you're pregnant, people are going, but I had, a glass of wine, or I had this, and it's so much pressure in motherhood, and which is why we need you, like it's because I just feel like it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, you just reminded me there, like with my experience with Arlo, getting a genetic diagnosis at 28 weeks, like, oh yeah, and you want me to be calm and have the oxytocin flowing, like no chance. But yeah, I can't believe those statistics. That is so
Yeah, we're
wow.
really doing something wrong in that calculation. And I've had a sonographer do my course before, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we know they're wildly wrong." It's like, why don't we give people like
Really?
a due window, or like a due period, or
I know it is so
yeah,
wild that we get one date, isn't it? And when people tell people their actual dates, I'm like, wow, you're brave. Because like everyone is going to home in on that day. And as you said, like a week or two over. But it always fascinates me how people's personalities can impact the way that they approach birth as well. Like I know people that have just want to get the baby out. They're not interested in learning about the process. They're like, I just want them out. I just want them out. Like they're absolutely happy to give all of that control over to other people. So it isn't for everyone, is it? Hypnobirthing. Do you find that you get more like control freaks coming your way? Who do you mostly
do you
work
know
with?
I do get a lot of teachers,
Do you?
but no, I think I've got to have quite a mix. Sometimes I get an email from somebody who says, "Oh, can I come and do a course because I'm high risk?" or those sorts of things, or because I'm older, and we have that geriatric mothers, which is a lovely term, but those sorts of things. And I'm absolutely, and I've done, C-section specific courses, and I really try to make the techniques applicable to any birth, so that you can, if things do change plan, that you can still keep that control of your breathing and, visualizations, and your birth partner can feel like they know exactly what's going on, because I
Yeah.
think it's huge for them as well, seeing that lack of control, and they're kind of seen as a bit like useless.
Yeah. And actually, from what I know of hypnobirthing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's, absolutely about that joint partnership and utilizing each other throughout the process of it. I mean, I loved hypnobirthing. I'm such a believer of it. You don't have to sell it to me, basically. So, Vicky, tell us what it is that you offer to families that are pregnant.
So, yeah, I know we've spoken loads about hypnobirthing. My one thing that I thought when I did set up, and I thought, "Do you know what, this is really helping people, and this is making a difference," that I thought that hypnobirthing, it ends at the birth, and you practice all that beautiful, mindfulness and relaxation and all those lovely techniques, and then you have the baby, and then personally, I had that crippling anxiety, and for months. And so that's kind of what led me to the yoga. So my hypnobirthing course, I made just some postnatal affirmations and a postnatal relaxation track. It's not a part of self-care. It's not instead of a shower. It's 10 minutes that when you're starting to find that racing heart, racing thoughts, that you can bring yourself to, the same thing as you practiced all your pregnancy, but different because it applies to now. So that's where I kind of came from, the course developed. And then I was like, "Oh, do you know what? I just think that like the yoga leads so nicely into it, of having that hour of calm." that hour for you and for your baby, you know, in pregnancy, strengthening your body for whatever birth you're going to have. You need strong glutes because you're going to be carrying a baby and pushing a pram, and you need to release the tension in your shoulders and all of those things. And you need that relaxation at the end.
Yeah.
Carrying it through, then do the hypnobirthing if it's for you, and then do keeping that going in postnatal, so mum and baby yoga. I just wish that I had done that. Do you know what I mean? With my first, I wish that I loved pregnancy yoga, and he was born and I stopped it. And it was all consumed, and actually carrying something on is carrying a bit of you from pregnancy right through.
Yeah, that transition. And that's a really good point you make, actually, about everything stopping, because the only thing that then carries on is your midwife visits, and then they tail off, don't they? And you have your 6-week check and it's goodbye. And that's the gap that I really saw as well. And I know you and I spoke before about postnatal plans, and like you make your birth plan, and particularly with hypnobirthing, that you can make really bespoke plans and really invest time in those. And then it feels wild that there's no postnatal plan, particularly, you know, when people have maybe a predisposition to feeling anxious, or mental health experiences, or previous trauma that might seep in, you know, or that might have been like you say, some of your clients might be at higher risk for like a NICU stay or things like that might come in the way. But or just even knowing where to access those things when the baby is here, because mental health support, yoga, all these separate things might not be for people, right? But like, it's about finding your thing and the thing that helps you. Like you said, connect with that older person, not in a way that makes you feel sad, but that transition. We really need to do work, don't we, on that transition, the 4th trimester.
Yeah, those midwife appointments tail off pretty quickly, don't they? And then you're kind of on your own. And then making it sound like it's really negative, it is wonderful, but all that outside stuff of the like completely unrealistic like pressures of things. I had no idea you still had a tummy when the baby was born. Like, how wild is that? I know I was like 26, I wasn't young. I didn't know that my stomach would be 7 months pregnant for 4 months. And I know everybody's so different, but that's because at the time, and I know social media and things is changing slightly, but 8 years ago, we saw Kate Middleton stood on the steps with hair and makeup the day after a birth, and people went, "Oh, she doesn't look great, does she?" It's like, I had no idea what was realistic.
No. I always remember when Meghan Markle had her baby as well, and she was in heels and a like white outfit walking through the palace, like introduced. I remember thinking, look back now and I'm like, God, the conversations that must go on behind the scenes there, or like, you know, particularly if you're breastfeeding and stuff. I mean, I struggled to even like walk out the hospital, let alone tuck a pair of heels on. Jesus Christ. Wow. But and I think we are starting to challenge, aren't we, that bounce back thing. I remember posting about that with Arlo, actually, because I had extra fluid with him, with his condition, and my tummy was really stretched. And even now, I've got like some real texture on my skin and like loose skin, which I've just started exercising for a year later, because that's actually the only time that I felt able to start doing that. And we don't talk about that either. You think, oh, you can go back to exercise 6 weeks. No, you can't, really. And actually, like, the pulls that you might get, particularly with a C-section, or like your pelvic floor from a traumatic birth or whatever. So I think we are starting to challenge those myths, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm 2 years on, and all the postnatal yoga training that I did, I would say my body is still postnatal. You know, as I've got older, I don't want to be who I was before. But I did with my first, and in that kind of cloud of confusion, I think I did. But now I think it's something about the 30s as well. I feel like I've been like, actually, this is who I am with postnatally, and that's great. But it's a minefield, isn't it? What we expect of ourselves as well, postnatally.
Yeah, definitely. So you had your third and she came a bit late.
Yeah. So she was born at home as well. So for Charlie, I'd planned a water birth, but I got out. And for Harry was born at home. And I was genuinely just too lazy to set up a birth pool for Harry's birth. So he was born, I loved pregnancy yoga when I was pregnant with Harry, and he was born on my yoga mat on the living room floor. Yeah. And then Millie was born 40, I think she was 41 plus 6 or something. And, you know, I had my actual midwife was off at my 41-week appointment. And the midwife I had was like, right then, I'm going to get you booked in. All right, we'll just book you in. Can you go to the hospital now? And I, even after I'd been teaching hypnobirthing for years by this point, I left crying in the car park. And then I thought, there's no way that I'm going to naturally go into labour in this situation. So the next day, then I rang the hospital. I requested a different midwife. I cited my rights. I wanted to know, you know, I wanted to secure my home birth for if baby continued any longer, you know, and I eventually would have gone into thinking along the lines that you were thinking as well of, you know, which is going to be best for me. And then after that, I picked the boys up from school. We came back, we got out my wedding album, we put on the birth playlist, and we like just danced. And I'm like pointing over here because it's just here in the lounge. And we danced, and I put the boys to bed, and I just immediately walked out of the bedroom and was like, yeah, she's coming tonight. Like I could just feel the difference. And she would not have come, I don't think, unless I'd have taken that fear away. So then, yeah, she was born. We came downstairs, like my husband Aaron set up the birth pool, and the midwife came, and then she was born at home about 3 a.m. And then so bless Charlie, my eldest, has slept through 2 births. I've just been upstairs in his bed while I've given birth twice.
That's amazing.
And then I know, my husband got up and did the school run then with them, took them off to school, and we sat on the sofa just absolutely in awe of what had just happened. She was by far the biggest. So when she was born, my husband said, gosh, she looks like a toddler. She was 8-13. And we kind of just looked at her for all that time. Yeah.
Yeah, Alba was £8.5 actually. She had like really like long nails and like peely skin, and yeah, she's definitely had that overcooked look about her. So you actually had 3 really great births by the sound of it. I do think girls are a bit lazy as well. I think Alba would have been in there for another, you know, like 2 weeks if she'd had the chance. She was so lazy.
I've heard loads about girls.
Yeah,
they're just comfy. Yeah, they were all really different. Like, you know, with Charlie's hospital, and there was elements of fear. Harry's, it was like much quicker. Probably if I had to choose the best one, because it was just nice. Charlie was 2, and when I went upstairs in the morning to get Charlie up, I said, Charlie, you know, come downstairs. Your baby brother's down here. And then at bedtime the next night, he said, Mummy, no more babies tonight, please. He thought they just came in the night.
So magical. Oh, did you? And then did yours get to like? I remember getting to like 4 months, the realization that the baby was staying. I know some friends have had their kids say like, "Can you go back now?" And I just think it's like,
yeah, I think the boys are at that stage with Millie with since she turned 1. I've never known anything like it. The battles are unbelievable. She, you know, she potty trained like the week after her 2nd birthday because she knows her mind. And the boys are like, they're like running from her. They have a stair gate on their room to protect themselves. I mean, it's bonded them more than ever, but now I think they're like, shit's really hard.
Girls are very determined, and Alba really self-led, everything like that. Like I'd always think like, oh, I probably need to get her off the bottle now, or I probably need to potty train her, and she'd just do it, and I'd be like, oh yeah, another reminder that she's going to lead the way. I'm very nervous for the teenage years with her.
Yeah, I can't even think about teenagers yet. 8 is like, 8 is a nice age where Charlie is. Like, he can make a cup of tea now. I know that's, that's not all it's about, but he can make a cup of tea and he can have a good chat and he can play a game of Monopoly. And it's a whole new level of like friendship and
focus
not
and
having to be on
concentration.
edge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think each age just brings something so nice, doesn't it? Um, yeah, and trying to savor every moment. But yeah, I did not have nice pregnancies. My first were nice, but yeah, C-section recoveries are hard. And like you said, postnatal support, like you have to just reel in your village and yeah, all of the emotions. But postnatal plans have got to be a thing of the future.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one that I give in my course, just that goes with that track, a postnatal plan. And the amount of people that haven't thought for second babies, I just always say it's so much easier to ask for support before the baby's here than it is once you're here and maybe you feel vulnerable and there's lots of changes that have happened. So why not put in place something for that child that you've already got? And if you don't need it, you don't need it. Yeah, posted.
Yeah,
And like when I think to Charlie, I think we were making people cups of tea. We had back-to-back visitors for 3 weeks after he was born, and it was lovely, and we were so proud. But I was cleaning the house, and we were making people cups of tea. And with Harry, anyone who came into my house, I was like, "And could you just hoover? And can you bring us some dinner?" Like just
yeah,
those things that make sense.
yeah. I remember a week after Alba was born, Boris made an announcement saying we're going into lockdown on Tuesday. And we had like a flurry of visitors, people getting in to see her before lockdown happened. I look back now and I'm like, what was I doing? Like, one, there was a reason we were going into lockdown because of germs. And I remember Lloyd saying, like, this is mad. We've got like 4 different sets of people coming today, and we've got a feeding plan for breastfeeding, and you need to sleep. And I remember Lloyd saying that quite clearly with Arlo. I'm not doing that again with the tea making and booking everyone in. Like people can just see him and when we're ready and when we have settled and we found our normality. Because yeah, that I think that's a real first time learner thing, isn't it? When you have your first one. And I'm always really conscious to give my friends that have babies, days or weeks or not go in and just drop them dinner on their doorstep. When you have your first baby, it's just carnage and you don't really know why it is, but it is because you're at home and you've got this baby to look after. I just remember calling my mum the second day we got home or something saying like, Mum, please, can you just come here now? Nearly crying. She was like, yeah, all right, I'll be there soon. And she said she walked in and there was like 2 rounds of toast that had popped and not been buttered. There was tea bags in the mugs that had just never been made.
Oh,
Clothes everywhere. Loads of unfinished tasks. Me in a like bleeding nipples, like not showered. Lloyd just like,
yeah. When my sister-in-law had her first, we were all so excited, and me and my husband went out and we bought, him a lovely, cute little tracksuit and things. But my husband actually bought them a delivery voucher as well. And I thought, he has listened to me. He has listened, and
perfect, perfect present. What's the one thing you would say to someone who's like thinking about doing hypnobirthing or some form of kind of pre or postnatal yoga? Like, what would you say is going to be the most helpful thing for them if they were to come onto one of your courses or
I think it's about finding your own confidence. And as people, we're never always confident. It peaks and troughs, doesn't it? And finding a way that you can keep some of your own confidence. And if that's in knowing your choices, if that's in bringing yourself out of flight or fight once a day, which is probably once as realistic for some people, then making the time to do it. So yeah, I do like a free hour hypnobirthing every other month. I just do it on Zoom so that people can come and get a bit more information and realize that I'm not going to hypnotize you or anything too crazy. And I find that after people have done that hour, I get a few people that go, great, I've got loads of tips, but I get loads of people that go, I want to know more. And not just because they all want this home birth water birth, it's because they all want to have that ownership and that control and to feel positive.
Yeah.
which, you know, it does have an impact, and you'll know the statistics on that more than me, of postnatal mental health affected by birth. But the kind of, we're at the statistics of 1 in 3 people experience trauma in birth, and that is just too high. That's the system, and that is, we're doing something, you know, we're not doing women the service that they deserve. So that's, you know, that's my driving force, because I just don't want anyone to, you know, obviously there's things that can be traumatic, but let's try and get that statistic as low as possible to protect women and to protect babies and children and mental health for the future.
Yeah, and one of my biggest takeaways from the hypnobirthing that I did a course with Sophie Rutherford. She moved away, but she was based in Brighton. And one of the biggest things that I took away from it was, right, how much it taught me about birth, what your body does, the phases, like even just knowing what a contraction is, like your muscles moving in those different ways to push the child out, positions that, you know, you're taught on telly to lie down and like feet in stirrups, but actually that's not a good position for your child to come out. Like learning those new positions that, you know, I didn't get to do, but you know, it was so educational alongside learning really good techniques that ultimately helped me relax and help me kind of regain control in those moments of fear.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, big dream, probably, I would never know how to go about this, but I would love to go into secondary schools and do an in-depth biology lesson about birth and about the hormones, and not just the girls, because the boys need to know as well. You know, not go, oh, periods are just for girls to know about. No, this is the inner workings of a body. You know, there's not enough research on women's bodies. There's not enough research on the postnatal period and, you know, the impacts long term of lots of these things in birth. Just if when Millie's in secondary school, she has, not just Millie, you know, Millie, Charlie and Harry, they're all in secondary school. They have an education of women's bodies are fantastic. This is how they work. This is how we inhibit the hormones. This is how we increase the hormones. And, you know, we take away so much fear. And oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just,
you don't face it until you are in it. I remember before I was even thinking about having children being like, oh my God knows how that will happen, but I'll just learn, I'll just sort it out when it happens. And there's a real culture in work. We're very like that in the UK, particularly about death. Like, oh my God, I can't imagine losing that person, and I'll just be a mess and it'll be a nightmare. But actually, we don't think about death and the circle of life and birth, and we're all on a path of our lives. Like we approach things in a really avoidant way, like you were just saying.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And like it was my birthday in September. My husband said to me, "Oh, are you really sad now? You're 34." And I said, "No." I was like, because I'm probably, you know, mentally in the best place I've been in many, many years, and I know who I am, and I know what the future looks like. Just that kind of self-assurance and confidence that we often just gets taken away in these big events like giving birth or parenthood, and for men as well. You know, it does affect men.
Yeah, that's why when I was planning postnatal minds, I looked at like loads of different avenues of whether, like, because you can really home in on mums and mamas because they're the ones that grow and birth their babies, you know. Actually wanted to make it gender neutral and have a service that I can offer to dads and men as well, because like you said, they're the ones that also live through the trauma or look after a partner who is experiencing like the biggest hormone drop they're ever going to experience in their lives. And that's scary for the men as well. And actually, you know, when you're in situations when you're in NICU or you've got a traumatic birth, like you both experienced that, they've watched it. In a way, you could argue that men see more because you've probably got drugs flowing through your system, or they're seeing more than you might be if you're laying down. Or so I was really mindful of that when I created Postnatal Minds, that it wasn't just for mums, because I think dads can get forgotten sometimes in that whole birth process, the postnatal process, sometimes even in the pregnancies. I mean,
Yeah.
they can't make midwife appointments, they might not feel involved, and there again is a culture that men just get on with it and get help their partners to feel better, and actually they totally neglect their mental health needs and their psychological needs from what they've experienced too.
Yeah, I when I know I've been liking every post you do, but I just think there is such a need for people to have the space to talk. I think there's a lovely place for a lot to be said about those church baby groups where they're £2 and you can go and you can talk to somebody and you can go, how old's yours? Oh yeah, mine's 9 months. And like that. But actually, other than that, I don't know I wouldn't have known where to go for a next step of support. And when you're vulnerable or sleep deprived, getting out the door is hard. Like,
Yeah.
really.
I
Even
mean,
now.
particularly when you've got more than one child. Like, poor Arlo's been woken up a zillion times. Albert was never woken up. I always say to people, it's like military operation sometimes, trying to get out the door. And we're entering the school world next September, and I'm already getting anxious about it, because I struggle to get out. Nursery won't close their doors; they'll take her whenever. But school, you've got to be there. But having a baby is hard, even if you're sat in a lounge all day, every day, with everything around you that you need, let alone having to keep another human alive, having to think about food and a clean house and getting the laundry done. The mental load is a lot. And like you were saying about fourth trimester planning, we need to open up those conversations more about moving from 1 to 2, the mental load, like the to-do list can wait. And I think it's so important what you're doing, and creating that space and resource for women after birth, is such an important part of your work. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, if you put in the practice before, then you may as well keep using that practice. I listened to my hypnobirthing tracks until, well, I mean, only probably just after Millie was born did I stop. So if I had periods of anxiety in the night, or COVID was a big one, I wasn't pregnant in COVID, but I found, the whole thing really anxiety inducing, and so I couldn't sleep often, and to go to sleep I'd put on a hypnobirthing track, and my husband would be like, I can't believe you're still listening to it. But I had created a trigger that made me feel good, so why get rid of that? I was in my lavender oil, and it was Holly de Cruz. Hi, this is Holly de Cruz. And it seemed crazy, but it works. It really does. So if you can put in the effort, you've got those techniques forever.
Yeah.
Which I didn't really realise first time.
Yeah, it's such a good resource, and not even necessarily hypnobirthing ones. If I'm really struggling or I'm in my head, I'll just literally YouTube relaxation to get to sleep, and within 10 minutes I'm asleep, So I think just that factor around that self-care of allowing yourself facilitated relaxation is so powerful as well, and we don't do it, and there's a lot of stigma breaking down about that as well. But anything like that, any alternative therapies, all these things for women post-birth, I'm just so here for it. Yeah, I'm the biggest flag flyer of it ever.
Yeah, I mean, just taking care of yourself, a shower is not, it's not,
No.
That's compulsory. That's not a luxury. If I look at the luxuries I had postnatally the first time, I would have thought a cup of tea and maybe some lunch that wasn't a Mars bar. And then the third time, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just off for a massage. Actually, I need to go and have a facial.
I know, God, if you could teach yourself the first time what you know now. But that's the importance of education, and kind of, what we're trying to do, I guess, is that in providing a resource for people to know that that's okay and really normal and really great for you to do that.
Yeah.
So Vicki, if people have been listening to this and they feel like they'd like to learn more or know more or hear more about what it is that you do, and I know you've mentioned some sessions that you run for people kind of free every other month, where will they find that? Where can they find you?
So my Instagram is Vicki Thorpe Yoga, and that's my Facebook. And then my website is just vickythorpe.co.uk. I'm not very inventive. Before I was called Vicki Thorpe, like branded, I was just sure I'm hypnobirthing. So yeah, I don't have a very inventive.
You don't need to overcomplicate it. There's enough going on. But yeah, thank
Yeah.
you so much for joining. And yeah,
Thanks.
everyone who's watching, definitely give Vicky a follow. And I hope in the new year we can get something together, because I think that, the two ethoses of both postnatal mind and your work so nicely together. So thanks so much for coming. And
Thank
yeah, hope
you.
you've all enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to seeing you for the next episode.